Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about the effects of changes to aggregate demand, that is the curve shifting to the left or to the right, and then the same for short-run aggregate supply, the curve shifting to the left or to the right. Okay, so we'll start with aggregate demand increasing. So when that happens, the aggregate demand curve is going to shift to the right, like we have here. And so when that happens, our equilibrium is going to change from this point here to this one here. Okay, so we use Y to represent real GDP. The Y star that I have here, that's just to indicate where real GDP is at potential GDP. Okay, so anyway, when aggregate demand increases, real GDP is going to increase from Y1 to Y2, and the price level is going to increase, in this case, from 100 to 105. Okay, so aggregate demand increases. That means that, according to this model, GDP has to increase. The price level also has to increase, according to this model. And finally, unemployment. Okay, so for this, let's look at this for a moment. So recall we have these three categories of unemployment, and we expect there to be some amount of frictional and structural unemployment no matter what. It's just the reality of having a healthy, dynamic economy. So these numbers are just made up, but let's say that in some society, their structural unemployment is at 2% and frictional is at 1.8. And so we call this 3.8% or whatever it might be, full employment, or the natural rate of unemployment. And this is the amount of unemployment that we will have even when we are at potential GDP. Okay, now cyclical unemployment is different, and I won't get into everything that's involved with cyclical unemployment, but except to say that cyclical unemployment, the way we're looking at it now, is on top of occurring sometimes on top of these other two types of unemployment. Okay, so when we are at long-run aggregate supply, if our equilibrium happened to be somewhere that also intersected this long-run aggregate supply curve, then cyclical unemployment, we believe, would be at 0. So anytime we are to the left of long-run aggregate supply, we have some positive amount of cyclical unemployment. And the farther we are to the left, the more cyclical unemployment we have. Okay, so when we were here, we were this far from long-run aggregate supply, and so we had some, let's say, substantial amount of cyclical unemployment. We moved to the right to this point here. We still have some cyclical unemployment, but it's less. So aggregate demand increases. That means that unemployment is going to decrease, according to this model. All right, now what about when aggregate demand decreases? So the curve shifts to the left. So in that case, we were here. And now we are at this point right here. So GDP has fallen from Y1 to Y2. The price level has also fallen, let's say from 100 to 96. And so actually, let's just make a note, that's going to be deflation. Here, the price level going up, this is inflation. Okay, and then finally, we were at this point here, we had some cyclical unemployment. Now we're all the way over here, so we have even more cyclical unemployment. So unemployment is going to rise when aggregate demand decreases. Okay, now let's look at a change to short-run aggregate supply. If short-run aggregate supply increases, then we're talking about this curve here. It's going to move to the right. And so consequently, GDP is going to increase. The price level is going to fall, whatever this is here, 97, I guess, down to here, 93 or 94. Price level decreases. And unemployment, so we were here, this far away from potential GDP. Now we are closer to potential GDP, so that means that unemployment is also going to decrease. Okay, and then finally, short-run aggregate supply decreases. I'm not going to do this one. I'll leave it for you to think about. But the idea is that this curve is shifting to the left now. So we're going from this point here to somewhere else. But I'll let you think about that.